Rick, you look awful comfortable there. What are you in, a big old leather chair or something?
I'm in my napping chair, Philip. If the meeting gets too boring, I'm going to hide my face too.
You mute
Chairman
out.
Harris,
What's going on?
Chairman Harris, we're live and all set.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Joel. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for joining us via Zoom for the October 6th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Glad everyone's here. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules and for helping serve the people of our grand city here. We'll call the meeting to order. And Joel, if you would take roll, we'll see exactly how many people we have here.
Yes, we have Commissioner Howden.
Here.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Here.
Commissioner Nichols. Commissioner O'Day. Commissioner Pinkley.
Here.
Commissioner Richards. Commissioner Romine.
Here.
Commissioner C. Vice Chairperson Davis.
Here.
Chairperson Harris.
Here.
Chairperson Harris, we have 7, so we have a quorum.
Thank you, Joel. I want to remind the commissioners that when you wish to ask a question or when we're voting, which we'll have to do, of course, orally here, be sure and state your name so that we know who's speaking. That will help. So, and then anyone listening in on our broadcast, of course, as far as public comments, you can go to the branstonmissouri.gov website, and there is a place there for submitting public comments. And of course, you could always look up Joel's email under the planning department section of the branstonmo.gov website. With that said, Joel, I think we had some minutes from way back in August. Did the commissioners have a chance to look those over? And if so, I would take a motion to approve or to make some modifications or changes.
And we would ask you please to say your name when you're making motions. That way we can have it clear in the record.
All right, this is Commissioner Lloyd responding to the approval, making the approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Howden, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Howden. Any other comments or questions by the commissioners regarding the minutes from back on August 4th? If not, well, Joel, would you call roll and would the commissioners respond yay or nay for that?
Howden,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Pinkley,
Yes.
Romine,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
With 6-0 vote, the minutes are passed.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, commissioners. Sometimes we do have some old business to take a look at as we've done in the past, but there does not appear to be any of that for tonight's meeting. That takes us down to the regular public hearing items. Our first one dealing with outdoor animal exhibits within the property at 2020 West 76 Country Music Boulevard. And Joel, if you would help us with that.
Absolutely. This is a request to amend Resolution 12-1.10 to allow outdoor animal exhibits within the property located at 2020 West 76 Boulevard in Branson, Missouri. The request was provided by the owner, Branson's Wild World, and we do have Mr. James Kelly on with us this evening as well to answer any questions after staff goes through their the presentation. You can see the property here in the image on the screen. Its current zoning is planned development. It's actually the office max plan development that was approved back in '99. And again, the request is for outdoor animal exhibits. Obviously, they already have their facility that they received a special use for back in the past, and we'll kind of hit some more of those details here as we go through the presentation. Next is our vicinity map showing aerial of the area. The subject property is outlined in red, and you can see it's on the south side of 76 Country Boulevard within the city limits. Next is our vicinity map showing the zoning of the property, currently zoned planned development, adjacent to other properties zoned entertainment. That's the kind of magenta color, and then we have mixed use there to the south, which is more kind of the peach or salmon color. There is another planned development across 76 Country Boulevard to the north, and then some community commercial off to the west. We've also included the existing land use vicinity map for reference to show there's quite a few vacant properties in the area, but there is also some high density residential properties as well as some commercial and lodging properties. We also include our orthometric views from all 4 directions for reference as needed during tonight's discussion. And then the next thing we want to go through is just a timeline of this property to kind of get things started. So first, starting off in July of 1999, that's when the plan development for this property, the Office Max plan development, was approved by the city. It included, like many of our plan developments, several uses other than the initial intent, which was obviously Office Max back in 1999. And the reason a lot of the plan developments have done that is just to provide the greatest flexibility possible for each property. In December of 2012, you all considered a special use permit for Branson's Wild World, specifically to allow them to operate a petting zoo attraction. One of the uses allowed in the Office Max plan development was a museum or exhibition space. That gave the ability for Branson's Wild World to operate. However, once they wanted to start doing petting zoo attractions or having their customers hold the animals, that's what triggered the need for the special use back in 2012. In June of 2016, a building permit by Branson's Wild World was issued by the city to construct fencing for outdoor areas behind their property. However, then in May of 2017, that building permit was closed. There was no activity on it. A very similar request was then submitted to the city this year in April, again for constructing fencing for outdoor animal exhibits. However, upon staff review this go around, there was no mention that could be found of any outdoor activities within either the Office Max plan development documentation, anything from the Planning Commission meeting minutes back in 2012, or from the staff reports at that time as well. As a result, staff felt it was appropriate to have the applicant amend their special use permit so it was completely clear what their intent was for operations and use of the property. Here's just a close view of the property, an aerial, again, more for reference as we go through the presentation if needed. And then we have the plan that was submitted by the applicant. I apologize that it may not be as clear as possible to see, but what we do have is the building is located here, the existing building, and then there is an existing water tower from the city here. And then you can see several areas divided up with fencing with many different animals that I'll go through here shortly. But essentially the fencing will be in an L shape around the water tower, between the water tower and the building here to the north. Those outdoor spaces that I just pointed out in the L formation are for tigers, lions, ligers, wolves, kangaroos, servals, fox, porcupines, jackals, birds, and stingrays as well. There is some concern when staff first reviewed this with how close this property is to 2 particular ones, the Branson Park Apartments, which have a building less than 100 feet to the east of this area, and then there's also the Holiday Inn Express, which is to the northeast about 350 feet. However, Animal Control from the city of Branson has reviewed this request and is comfortable with it, but they just want to be sure that the enclosures comply with all the standards necessary for the different types of animals being held. And they did also mention that noise needs to be highly considered and be mindful of it not becoming an issue in the future. As a result, staff recommends approval. What we've done is we've taken not only the list of conditions that you all approved for the petting zoo back in 2012, but we've also added some additional ones, and I'll go through that list at this point. Number 1, that this special use permit is not transferable in any manner and therefore shall not be transferred from owner to owner. If Branson's Wild World Incorporated ceases operation for 6 months or more, this special use permit shall be null and void. And number 2, the installation and activities covered by this special use permit, as shown in Exhibit A, shall be in accordance with all applicable city, state, and federal requirements, including but not limited to the height, overhang, strength, and containment of fencing. And number 3, all regulations and standards concerning the treatment and handling of animals shall be met. And number 4, lions, tigers, and ligers must be shut indoors between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And number 5, any person under the age of 5 shall not be allowed to handle any of the animals. Signs shall be posted stating this in every area where contact with an animal is possible. Number 6, the applicant shall apply for and receive a business license from the City of Branson prior to any business operations, and that license shall remain in good standing. And finally, number 7, if all conditions of this resolution authorizing the issuance of this special use permit are not acted upon on or before January 1, 2022, this special use permit shall be null and void. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Any of the commissioners have any questions for Joel at this particular time? Yes, Commissioner Howden?
Joel, I guess I have an initial comment, and that's originally I would think that 100 feet as far as noise would be too close to these apartments that are back there. But I have a good analog to see how this kind of works out. I manage Lenina Inn on Shepherd of the Hills, which is directly across from the Promised Land Zoo. And they have outdoor fencing, they have hyenas, they have animals that you really would think would be loud. And there are times where I forget that they're there. You know, we never even hear them. So I think with, you know, proper zoological management, that can be done reasonably. So that's one comment I have.
Yeah, understand. And obviously the city has its noise ordinance that is definitely in play and can be utilized if necessary, if complaints are received.
So Joel, this Phil, can those hours of operation are limited for the larger cats to be outside? Can we amend those if we decide that it's the times need to be changed, or we got to stay for the duration of this?
No, we simply, staff provides those conditions as a recommendation, as a starting point, if you will, for our conversation. You all completely have the ability to edit, delete, add to, whatever your desire is, so that you all are comfortable with it.
See, Joel, one question, is it possible, just a procedural thing here, to go back and reopen a special use permit that's been approved at a later time to change some of those times?
Absolutely, it would be amending the special use, and we're actually processing an item that you'll see at the next month, case in point of a special use permit that had certain times, and they are coming back to you all to ask for those times to be amended. So that is a process that can be taken on at a future date, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Clark, because that's the way I wanted to answer that question.
Oh, okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Commissioner Lloyd. Any other commissioners have a question or?
I have a question, Romine. I didn't see in any of the documentation about waste from these animals outside. I assume there's is inside. I don't know. That doesn't, I suppose, matter to the residents that are next to this, should they move them outside. But is there any concern about any of that for the smell and things like that when it's so close to a residential and hotel, motel, those kinds of things?
Obviously, there's concern. We do have Sergeant Kaufman on here that may be able to shed some light on that. We also do have the applicant who may be able to provide, when you all are ready for asking him questions, you know, how they'll be handling that situation as well. So those are a couple options for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Romine. Any other commissioners have a question for Joel?
Commissioner Davis here. Joel, did you, in this, I can't remember, in this special use process, did you contact the neighboring hotel and the neighboring apartment complex and notify
Yes, because
this change?
yes, because their properties are within 185 feet of the subject property. They did receive the notification that we're required to provide. And we did not hear any comments from any of the adjacent property owners.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Anyone else have a question or for Joel? If not, Joel, is the applicant, can you bring them on in case commissioners wish to ask him a question? Mr. Kelly, I think you said.
Yep, he's already joining us.
Okay.
I'm here.
Mr. Kelly, are there any statements you'd like to make? Any further information you could help us? Maybe talking about the waste on the outside and hours, et cetera?
Well, as far as the hours, we already have a system in which we're able to enclose the animals during that time. We have what is called a shift, which is a kind of like could be made out of blocks, or it could be a metal enclosure or whatever. And the animals get trained to eat inside there. That would be where the animal would go in there, where we could close them in and then safely enter the pen, as far as being able to take care of the actual pen itself without contact with the animals. Because as you can probably imagine, you just can't go into a pen with a tiger.
Yeah, right.
So you have to shift them in order for you to go in safely. And during that time, we take care of the pens as far as cleaning up all the waste and just generally straightening or repairing anything that needs to be done during that time.
Okay. And
That's done daily.
it's done daily. Okay. All right. And could you tell us a little bit about your experience with large cats and maybe even your employees' experience with them?
Well, the actual cats that we have, they've already been in our possession for about 4 or 5 years now over in Branson West. We have a different facility that we tried to open for a few years, but Branson West just wasn't able to draw the customers to that location. But we've still been taking care of them, and so it's not like we're brand new to taking care of cats. We've been taking care of them for quite some time now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any of the other commissioners have a question for Mr. Kelly?
Commissioner Harris?
Yes, Commissioner Howden.
Yeah. So it kind of goes to Commissioner Lloyd's point about amending the animals that perhaps could be outside during the night. My question will be about the wolves and the noise that comes from them.
Well, the wolves have already been outside for 8 years now.
Okay.
We actually already do have an outdoor pen that is part of the timeline that didn't get put in there, but we got approved for an outdoor pen for the wolves, and they have been out there pretty much. They have the outdoor pen for almost 7 to 8 years, and they don't usually make a lot of noise. People think wolves howl every night, but they don't. In fact, the only time they really howl is when a fire truck or an ambulance goes by. That seems to trigger them, but other than that, it's never been much of a problem, and we've never had a complaint from anybody who's been around there. In fact, most of the time, people enjoy having the animals around more than the opposite.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have a question for Mr. Kelly?
Commissioner Davis here?
Yes. Yes.
Yep. Mr. Kelly, 2 brief questions. Tell us about your waste management and I guess housing or retaining waste on site, and will it become a change to the odor issue for the neighbors? And then secondly, a little curiosity about what animals are going to be available for handling, petting in your indoor-outdoor facility, just to familiarize us with what's going to be touched. And I noticed there was a recommendation for children under 5 couldn't touch certain things. So tell us about that, please.
Well, as far as the children under 5 touching things, there's a couple reasons why that got put forward. Number one, some reptiles, we have reptiles at our place. Some of them carry salmonella, and you just can't tell which ones do and which ones don't, and there's no way to treat them for that. So it was just considered that any child under 5 can't really be told not to put their hands in their mouth or whatever. They don't have the mental capacity to listen that well. So it was decided that children 5 and below shouldn't touch any animals. So mammals don't even really have as much problem with that as that was more for the reptiles. But, in general, we have tourists, and I always have this joke that tourists leave their brains at home and they don't always watch their kids very well. So it's also a really good rule. so that, you know, at least if the child is over 5, they can take general instructions from our handlers on how to properly touch the animals. As far as the animals outside that would be touched, to be honest with you, you know, we were talking about doing a kangaroo exhibit where people could feed the kangaroos. Obviously, the tigers and the wolves would not be allowed to be actually touched by anybody. That's just not, there's not a safe thing. And actually, wolves are regulated by the state of Missouri, and that's a serious no-no by the state of Missouri. You can't allow that to happen either. So it would just be more of the minor animals, like the lynxes are safe enough that people can touch them, and the kangaroos, and maybe a couple of the other smaller animals, but none of the big cats or wolves or anything would be allowed in that instance. As far as the waste is concerned, we would dispose of the waste the way we do the other, which is, you know, pick it up every day. We double bag it, and we dispose it in, you know, the proper waste facility. So no one's ever complained before about the smell at Wild World. So as far as I know, I think we have it under control. And the bigger animals will produce a little bit more waste, but taking care of it is the same. And actually will be better in many ways.
Mr. Kelly, I guess I have a question,
Sure.
and maybe Joel would know the slope involved with the area there. Are we talking, are you going to reslope some of it, or is it going to cause some drainage issues, or?
No, we're going to try to use mostly the slope that's already existing on the property, so that we don't disturb any way. The land is already handling the water and stuff that's coming in there. We may have to put a couple of drain pipes or troughs to drain some of the water from flooding any of the pens. But
Right.
other than that, I don't think that we're going to change it. Wolves and tigers and lions, none of those animals care about being on slopes. And we'll have platforms for them to get onto level areas so that they can rest comfortably without that. But most of the time they prefer the sloped areas, believe it or not.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other commissioners have a question for Mr. Kelly?
I have one,
Yes.
Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly, are all of the animals, will they be outside 24/7, or when it becomes inclement, will they be transferred into the building? If so, how is that handled?
Well, all the animals would be outside pretty much all the time, but that's what the shifts are for. The shifts also operate as like a storm protection. So we have a really bad storm that's coming in. We can put the animals inside the shift. They'll be well protected inside there. And so, and they're insulated, and in some cases, even we might have to climate control some of the areas. So they'll be as protected as any other animal that's inside our building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Kelly, you're okay with the condition that lions, tigers, and ligers will be indoors between 10 and 7 a.m.?
Yeah, I agree that we'll put them in their shifts between those times. So,
Okay.
And with them being insulated and everything, even if they were to roar or whatever, you would never hear it because it would be completely muffled through the insulation.
Okay, good.
Commissioner Davis, question.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Kelly, let me be clear on the shift is a enclosure or shelter that's outside in the pen, or is it
Yeah.
actually in your building?
No, it's outside in the pen.
So they won't be indoors. They'll actually remain outdoors and be placed into the shift. How big is this enclosure?
Well, it all depends. We've built them out of like metal containers before, and we built them out of cinder blocks before, and they're pretty big, plenty big enough to hold the animal and give the animal room to move around in. But they're not giant, or they're not the size of a house or anything. They're I mean, a tiger shift might be like 10 by 10.
Okay. So Joel, that seems to be in conflict with the regulation that's been written.
So we did have it somewhat vague. The condition that we provided, it simply says must be shut indoors. So if you all feel more specificity needs to be provided, we can definitely do that.
Commissioner, Chairperson Harris,
Yes, Commissioner Howden.
what's the exact point of that? Is it safety mostly?
So our goal, and I'll kind of go back a slide here. and I'll use my pointer, but you can actually see from the aerial, there's what I'll call kind of like a goat path that probably quite a few people utilize when walking back and forth from this area to the 76 Country Boulevard corridor. And since the animals will be outside, we felt like for safety precautions, for disturbance, both to the animals and to the public that may be going through that area, it was just best to have those animals kind of out of view during the night. As some people say, nothing good ever happens at night. And so we just want to avoid any issues or anything like that. It would, to the applicant's point, muffle the noise a little bit as well during the evening. But our main thing was to try and get those animals out of visibility during the evening hours, not knowing if there would be, personnel on the property at all times for the applicant or security cameras or things like that. But again, more just a visibility.
And the shifts would do that just fine.
Joel, do we have regulations on building those type of small accessory structures on a PD?
They are allowed within the PD to have accessory structures that serve the project. That's kind of a common PD phrase. So I would classify it under that. If they're under 200 square feet and they do not have any electric or water or anything going to them like that, they wouldn't require a building permit to construct.
Okay. And a question for Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, have you noticed pedestrians there along the property line working their way back and forth at certain times?
It does at certain times. It's usually around when people quit work. So 5, 6 o'clock, something like that. And a lot of times they'll go to Walmart and they'll buy stuff. Then they'll take the cart all the way down and park the cart in our parking lot.
Oh,
I mean, every month we have to take at least 10 or 15 carts back to Walmart
right.
because people just do that. So yeah, there's a little bit of that. I wouldn't say like it's a tremendous amount of people. It's probably about 15 or 20 people that do it on a regular basis.
Okay.
So
Yes, Commissioner Howden.
Mr. Kelly, have you ever had any vandalism
no,
or any problems from those people?
no, none at all. Well, I shouldn't say that. Somebody has tagged the side of our building with a little bit of graffiti. But as far as vandalism or anything being destroyed or anything, I haven't had any problems yet with that.
But those cages are secure enough. They couldn't get in there and mess with them
No.
at night or.
And there's also a perimeter that goes around the whole property. So it's not like people can walk right up to the cage and the tiger's right on the other side. There's a whole perimeter that goes around the whole property that keeps you like 6 foot away from the actual cages that the animals are in. So that's required by the USDA and the state of Missouri. That's not even something I could go around if I wanted to. So there's plenty of perimeter that keeps people away from the animals.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question for Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Lloyd. And
Yes.
I'm just reminding the other commissioners, when we were working on something similar to the large animal habitats for one of our ex-musicians in town that used to have a lot of lines and stuff, they didn't we find out that the USDA, Joel, really didn't, it was either them or the state of Missouri really didn't have a lot of input on what kind of restrictions on large cats, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The animal control, when they were with the county, I know they were trying to do the research and reach out to different organizations, both at the state level and federally, to try and get some support on that. I can't speak specifics for how that all ended up. We weren't part of the final conversations with that group. But again, now with animal control in the city of Branson, I know Sergeant Kaufman was on here and he looks like he stepped away. Unfortunately, he probably had something else going on. But, now that that's at the city level, obviously we're going to be more involved in that process and making sure the cages meet any standards that are out there, as well as the care for the animals.
And actually, the USDA is very strict when it comes to cats. The pens have to be 16 foot tall. They have to be built out of certain materials and everything in order for me to, and I have to get approval from them before I could even move one animal into the cage. So
Okay, that's
they
good.
were very clear with me that just a couple weeks ago on that exact
Yeah.
subject.
So the other thing, Mr. Kelly, you mentioned something about sirens and loud noises would set off the wolves. We were talking about then. I don't know about the tigers and lions, but there will be a lot of that all night up and down 76 highway.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all the time that it does it, but occasionally they'll howl during that time. But if they're in their shifts at night, that won't matter because you won't be able to hear them during that time anyway. So it won't disturb anybody's sleep. And during the day, it would probably be the least loud thing on the strip.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other commissioners have a question? Yes, Commissioner Howden.
So are those the three animals, the only ones that you intend on keeping in their shifts?
Well, I know for a fact that all of those, the ligers, tigers, and lions are all trained to go into their shifts, so that won't be a problem. The wolves are not really trained, but that doesn't mean that we won't attempt to do that. What we normally do is use food as an incentive. They get trained that that's where they eat. And so come the end of the day, it's food, it's it's dinner time and they go in their shifts to eat their food. I can't say 100%. Wolves are really smart and sometimes they catch wind of that, and if they're not cooperative, they may or may not. You can't actually go in and force a wolf to go somewhere. But to be honest with you, it's never been I already have an outdoor pen with wolves and it's never been a problem with anybody before. So.
Thank you.
I had Commissioner Davis one question. One
Yes.
addition. Mr. Kelly, tell us about your personnel, your staff for this outdoor expansion of your business. Who's going to monitor it, and what are the hours of the presence of a human being on site? And what's going to happen if there seems to be an emergency or some issue that comes up in the night? Who's going to take care of all that? And will there be someone with quick access?
Yeah, of course. We have, I have two managers and I have myself. We all live within, I live within 4 minutes of the property and they live within 15 minutes of the property. And so we would be, that was actually a stipulation for the fire department and for the utilities department that we be on 24-hour call in case there was a problem. But of course, for the police department, that would also be, if there was a problem, we could be there within 10 minutes. We're normally there every day from about 8:30 in the morning till 6 at night is the normal operations in which we're there. And that would be most of the time where the animals would be out, where people would be able to see them and interact with them. Did I answer your question 100%?
Yes, so no one will be present in the building or on the premises after 6 o'clock.
No, but we do have cameras monitoring the whole inside, and I was planning on expanding all the cameras and everything to the outside, and we have remote access to the cameras and we have remote access to alarms and lights and everything. Now we're kind of pretty high tech now, so we could see anytime, day or night. Even when we have a problem where an aquarium overflows or whatever, we have water detectors to tell us in the middle of the night that we have a problem with an aquarium. So we would have all that stuff available. The handlers that I have, they treat the animals like they're their children, and they're there available all the time for any problem that may come up.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioners have a question? No? Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Appreciate your input on this proposal.
Thanks, guys.
The commissioners have any other questions for Joel at this time?
Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
As well. Joel, this applicant, has there been any, this applicant's been in business and successfully doing so for a number of years now with the indoor operation. Do our police, fire, or planning departments have any history of problems or difficulties with this applicant?
I'll let the other departments that are joining us this evening speak for them, but from a planning and development department standpoint, we have not. Mr. Kelly has been very patient with us this year, especially with his request. this is actually the last check box for his building permit to be issued, so he can construct the fences. But from our standpoint, we haven't had any issues.
Okay, let's see. I think we have Division Chief Fogel here. Randy, have you have anything to add to it for the commissioners?
We haven't had any issues to my knowledge with Mr. Kelly or his organization.
Okay, okay. And let's see, Kendall, Public Works.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, good. No, we haven't had any issues either. And Mr. Kelly already addressed our concerns with having access to personnel 24 hours. We do have a sewer main that crosses the back corner of the property.
I saw that.
And we talked about access to the manhole that's on the east side and all. So we're comfortable at this point.
Okay, thank you, Kendall. And I think Attorney Chris Lebec is here. Attorney Lebec, anything you could tell us from legal? Maybe he's not here.
No, I'm here. Nothing.
Oh. Okay,
And we do
Thanks.
have Sergeant Kaufman back with us as well for
Oh.
animal control.
okay. Sergeant Kaufman, everything all right with you for this particular applicant?
Yeah, we've had no issues with this applicant. We've been out there a couple times for inspections and had no issues in addressing our concerns. So we have no issues with the applicant or the proposed facility.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions by the commissioners for Joel or staff? Hearing none, then I would entertain a motion for resolution number SU 20-7, which is authorizing the Director of Planning and Development to amend the resolution to allow an outdoor animal exhibit within the property of 2020 West 76 Country Boulevard.
Houghton, so moved.
Okay, Howard, is there a second?
Lloyd will second.
Thank you. Any other comments by the commissioners? Okay, Joel, would you call roll, please?
Howden,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Pinkley,
Yes.
Romine,
Yes,
Davis,
Yes,
Harris.
Yes. The
request passes with a vote of 6-0.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, and
very
good
much.
luck with your expansion there. Look forward to seeing it all. It's very exciting.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Joel, I think we have another item or two. Could you help us with?
Yeah, our next item this evening is a request for high-density residential, HDR, zoning for the properties located at 121 Lenhart Lane in Branson, Missouri. The owner for this request is Lifestyle Contractors, LLC. It was provided by Lisa Allen of their company. And again, the request is for high-density residential zoning. We've provided an aerial image here on the first screen because we were unable to get a street view, but north is to the left, and the property is actually right here that I'm circling on the screen. And you can see the Chateau Cove development that we'll speak to in the presentation as well, just for reference. Next is our vicinity map aerial showing those areas that are inside the city limits as well as those areas that are outside the city limits in more of the washed out whitewashed tone. The two properties that are included within this request are outlined in red, and you'll notice they're at the intersection here of Lenhart and the Chateau Mountain Drive, as they're calling it. Next shows the existing zonings of those properties that are in the city limits. You'll see it's the two subject properties are adjacent to what's zoned HDR already. And as I mentioned, you can see kind of the northern half of the Chateau Cove development just to the southeast of these properties as well. I'll also point out that the green properties are within the city limits, and that's conservation land for the Army Corps of Engineers. And then the request is for high-density residential for the two properties. They actually plan to combine these two properties with the larger piece, and that's why they've requested this zoning. We've included the orthometrics for these two properties just for reference, and in the west one, you can actually start to see, again, the Chateau Cove development creeping into the side of the image. So timeline, as we like to do on these new properties to the city, annexation for them was requested in August of this year, just a short time ago. The petition was presented and accepted by the Board of Aldermen September 22nd and is scheduled for its first reading here next Tuesday in October the 13th, and then final reading, if we get to that point, on the 27th of October. The request establishes zoning for both properties, which is reflective and complementary of the proposed use and adjacent uses. As we always point out when we have these new properties that are annexing into the city limits, they're not included in the Community Plan 2030's preferred land use plan, as we did not include areas outside the city limits with that effort. However, it does match the surrounding properties that are in the city limits at this time. There is an existing residential structure on one of the properties. It was built in 1999. The applicant does plan to utilize that same structure for nightly rentals. And then on the southern property, or the remaining property, they will, as I mentioned, combine it with the larger piece of property, part of their Chateau Mountain development that'll be somewhat similar to the Chateau Cove development in that it'll be nightly rental. As a result, staff recommends approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Any of the commissioners have a question right now for Joel? Yes, Commissioner Howden, yes.
Hey, Joel, the Chateau Mountain and the Chateau Cove developments, just the existence of those, is that the reason there's so much activity in this area that's been going on recently?
I guess what kind of activity, just to make sure I'm answering your question?
Yeah, we've seen the Chateau Cove. We've seen a lot of this annexation of this part. You know, we've talked about in the past focusing on islands or perhaps some development in the Branson Hills area. But is that the reason that there's just development interest in this area, and that's the reason this is kind of happening?
Yeah, as I pointed out, there is that sliver of land that goes around the lake that's already part of the city limits. So one could make the argument this is an island to a certain extent. However, yes, there's been a lot of activity around Table Rock Lake, particularly this area. There are great views out there if you've been by the property at all, and they're definitely taking advantage of them. Both are challenging properties, but there is a demand for nightly rentals, and the location and the view, I think, are really helping this developer out, getting these sold very quickly. But yeah, we are seeing activity, and you know, it's probably not an area, if you would have asked us 5 years ago, we would have anticipated development, but they are doing it, and it's working out for them.
Thank you. Any other commissioner have a question or comment for Joel? Joel, is the applicant available, or?
No, it's Todd Chandler. He was going to possibly join us this evening, but it looks that he hasn't.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Any other questions or comments of Joel then, commissioners? Hearing none, then chair would entertain a motion for resolution 2020-6, which is approval of the HDR zoning for the properties at 121 Linhart Lane in Branson.
So moved, Romine.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Davis.
Davis, thank you. Any other comments or questions by the commissioners regard to this item? No, then Joel, would you call the vote roll, please?
Howden?
Yes.
Floyd?
Yes.
Pinkley?
Yes.
Romine?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
With the 6-0 vote, the request is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Joel. I think we have next on to municipal code amendment, special events.
Yeah, the last two items are proposed municipal code amendments. This first one is a request for one to Chapter 94, zoning pertaining to special events. Particularly, it's found in Articles 1 and 4 of the zoning code in Chapter 94. These amendments are being recommended to you all, and as they were identified by the special event team. The special event team was formed in September of last year by the assistant city administrator. They had 9 meetings between then and now. They were roughly about monthly meetings. However, we did have a couple months due to COVID that we unfortunately couldn't meet. The group consisted of 15 representatives, mainly from city departments, but also we had folks in there from the Chamber of Commerce, the Health Department, as well as the Convention Center. The overall goal of the Assistant City Administrator in forming this team was to improve the city's awareness of special events within not only the city, but the surrounding area. He always tells the story how when he came to town and there was the boat races going on in Lake Taneycomo, that he was very concerned that many people weren't aware of it and what causes it could have had on the community. Because it was held on private property in Lake Taneycomo, they were not required to get a special event permit, as an example. Another example that was provided was when Chief Matthews, the police chief, when he was kind of new in town as well, he was driving around and came across a parade, if you will, an informal parade of a certain type of vehicle. I can't remember which, but several vehicles that were all parading through town, one after another. And again, it wasn't anything significant, but felt that there was an opportunity that we could have been better aware that that was going on in the community. In addition, the group discussed, what our successes have been with special events, maybe some opportunities that could improve our processing of reviewing special events, and what is the city's role with special events from a management perspective and just oversight of these events that happen within our community and could have impacts. The first area that was identified rather quickly was the special event definition itself. If you all can remember, we've definitely had some history over the years with special event definition. Not that it's changed much in the last 20 years, but staff's interpretation definitely has. We did some research as we were going through this and came up with that around 2000 was when the city adopted an approach that a special event would be an extraordinary use of public property. From that point till about 2013, special events were considered by staff as, anything that was a special event, it greatly expanded. I think it got mostly out of control in 2011 is the year I point to, when there was 142 special events in the community. And the reason that it got so out of control was staff's interpretation of what extraordinary meant, grew to simply somebody putting a sign in the public right-of-way constituted a special event. And so people began using special event requests simply to put signs out. And so it was at that point in 2014 that staff took a step back and reread the definition that hadn't changed, but simply reread it and tried to narrow what extraordinary meant for special events. As a result, in 2014, there was only 29 special events. Two particularly early in that year were appealed to the Board of Aldermen, and the Board of Aldermen sided with staff on its interpretation. So that kind of set now the standard that we've been working with since that time. However, in 2016, when we were working on the zoning code update, we did provide further specificity with the special event definition just to update some of the language that was included. That ended up having a result of even fewer special events, down to 12, which has been our lowest amount since 2000 in 2017. And as I mentioned before, so the whole point of looking at the definition again now is because the city has, felt it's lost its awareness, particularly of smaller events in the area, or even those that are occurring on private property. So this is the definition. I won't read through it all, but it encompasses quite a bit. But in the middle is the key, and that's where it says that it includes something that's proposed to be held at a public facility. So that would mean public right-of-way or any public property. So what the team is presenting to you all for recommendation is to strike that phrase, to remove proposed to be held at a public facility. So by doing that simple removal, it would apply special events that they could be on both public and private property. The main component of this definition that will truly define what is a special event is mainly the second half of this definition. After the part that we're recommending to be removed, where it states which could result in activity impending or impairing the normal flow of vehicles and pedestrians on streets, sidewalks, or other public facilities used primarily for travel. So, that's going to be staff's true test when we're evaluating whether or not something's going to be a special event. Because we inevitably believe by this modification of the definition, we will see a higher volume of requests. Our next thought to provide to you all for recommendation was to create 3 different levels. The levels would provide city the ability to create different application requirements, different review processes, and more accurate fees, if you will, for each of the different levels. So the first one here is a level 1 event. Right now, the fee for any special event is $111. We're proposing that gets increased to $140, and that roughly averages out to about a half an hour of 8 staff persons' time to evaluate these requests. Again, that's an average. So the 4 factors that weigh into whether or not something is a level 1 event is the first part being attendance. It would fall anywhere between 1 to 1,000 and occurs on a single day. That the event would have minor impacts to the surrounding areas and held within an existing venue or area. That it would have minor transportation needs, meaning the minimal removal of parking or rolling street closures. And public safety staffing would not be required beyond normal city operations. For these types of requests, we would allow applications to be submitted not less than 15 days prior than the event, and exceptions to that, as well as approvals for these events, would be granted by the Planning and Development Director. And I do want to point out on the level 1 that all they would have to do is hit one of these 4 bullets, and it would fall into the level 1 event. Moving to the level 2 event, estimated to take an hour of staff time to review, so therefore the event fee would rise to $280. The attendance for these would fall between 1,001 to 5,000 and occur over multiple days. It would have moderate impacts to the surrounding area, but still held within an existing venue area. Moderate transportation needs, meaning they would need the removal of parking or short-term closures for streets, and they may require public safety staffing beyond normal operations. These would be allowed not less than 30 days to be applied for prior to the event, and again, exceptions and approval would be granted by the Planning and Development Director. And then finally, level 3 events, we're proposing a fee of $560. These would be for events that have over 5,000 in attendance, could occur over multiple and consecutive days, would have significant impacts to the surrounding areas, and cannot be held within existing venues or areas. They would have significant transportation needs, removal of parking, transportation mitigation plans, off-site parking plans, or long-term street closures, and they would require public safety staffing beyond normal operations. These would be very similar to those that currently go to the Board of Aldermen requiring street closures. So therefore, we kept the same requirements of applications need to be submitted not less than 90 days prior to the event. However, exceptions may be granted by the city administrator, and approval for the level 3 events would have to be given by the Board of Aldermen through resolution. The final area that we are recommending for you all to consider is reimbursement for special events for the expenses incurred by city to assist with them. Prior to 2010, in code, the city did require special events to reimburse the city for expenses incurred. Specifically in that code, it called out if there was stolen or lost property, any cost of materials or utilities used as part of the special event, and then any overtime wages specifically for police. Since about the last 5 years or so, the city has assisted with special events to the amount of approximately $25,000. So that, I think, right there is the case in point why the team felt it was important to make this recommendation for you to have the opportunity to recoup those costs as opposed to the taxpayers carrying that burden. As a result, here we have the change at the bottom of the screen. It's a simple change from may to shall. This was the same change that was done back in 2010. It had been shall prior to that time, but it was changed to may again back in 2010. As a result, staff recommends approval and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Any of the commissioners have a question now for Joel?
Yes, Chairperson
Yes,
Harris?
Commissioner Howden.
So Joel, it seems to me there might be two purposes for this board to review the special events. One might be organization, and then the second one, and this is where my question lies, is it to generally promote the idea of special events? Is that what they're going for?
So hopefully I am going down the right train of thought here to answer your question, but so the reason these changes are being presented to you all tonight is because they fall within Chapter 94, and it's your all's responsibility to review any code changes within that chapter. None of the recommendations tonight are proposing for any portion of the special event process to come through the Planning Commission. It would either be done at a staff level or at the Board of Aldermen level.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Joel,
Comment,
this is
Dave?
This is Phil Lloyd, excuse me.
Commissioner Lloyd.
The,
Yes.
what are the, those three levels? It seemed like in level 1 and level 2, you were having moderate traffic problems when you have up to 5,000 people. That seemed like that could create some havoc if you had 4,999, but I don't know. The other thing is, what is the penalty for a person that doesn't go ahead and get these pre-approvals and they go ahead and have an event?
So it's like any code violation that they would have the, there's a code requirement that basically says if any sponsor or any attendee of a special event does so without an approved permit, they're in violation of the code. So if there was a large event that was occurring and should have required a special event permit and they failed to get one, obviously the city would have the ability to step in and write citations as they could with any code violation. As far as the events themselves, again, kind of the breakdown, I have the level 2 up as an example. As I mentioned, if any one of these bullet points are hit, it would fall into a level 2. So an event may only have 5 participants, but if it's going to require moderate transportation needs, it would become a level 2 event, if that makes sense. So they don't have to have all 4 bullets. Once they have one, it becomes that event. So we'd work back from the level 3, and if they couldn't meet any of the bullets in level 3, then we'd walk through the bullets in level 2. If it couldn't meet any of the bullets of level 2, we'd walk through the bullets in level 1. If it still didn't meet any bullets of level 1, then it wouldn't require a special event permit from the city of Branson.
Bill, while you're on the level 2 one there, a couple quick things then. Each of the bullet points, if one of those is activated, then that means it's a level 2, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, do we need to have, and this is probably a question maybe for Chris Lebeck, do we need to have and or at the end of each of those? Like, in other words, when I see something like that, I think that all 4 of those are required. Now, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong, but.
So in the presentation, we've just tried to simplify it as much as possible. Okay. If you did get a chance to look at the staff report and the proposed resolution, we did include the word or after each line.
Okay. And then I guess my other concern is through the years, we've used words like moderate and severe or minor. And there's been a few times through the years, I know we've kind of had issues with that because that's a little vague and ambiguous. One person's moderate might be another person's severe. So are these are all decided by the director of planning then?
So we have it written as the recommended code at this point that staff shall determine special event levels based on the degree of impacts to the city, including but not limited to anticipated attendance as related to the venue being used, transportation, and public safety. And then a special event may be determined to either be a level 1, level 2, or level 3 event based on meeting at least one of the following criteria for each category. When we were putting this recommendation together, we did research of other communities and other towns, and this was an approach that several cities utilized, being able to create the different levels, because it's not one size fits all. Definitely with our events. I mean, even our special events that we review with the board today, when you look at the Firecracker 5000 or the Turkey Trot as compared to the Adoration Parade or the Veterans Parade, it's pretty challenging to say that those are similar events because of their impact on the community and how many people are involved with them.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess switching over to the change between may and shall, as far as the financial responsibilities. I guess my one comment for there is that I'm in support of the shall, but I know some people might think that, well, the particular activity is going to raise a lot of money that increases tax revenue, which would come back to the city. So why are you causing me, this effort to repay the extra hours for the fire and police? But to me, there is such a delay in time. You may not receive that tax money for what, a year or something, and then budgets for the fire and police and for utilities or whatever would be affected more immediately. So just for what it's worth, I think it's prudent of us to have the word shall rather than may. Any of the other commissioners have comments?
Commissioner
Joel,
Davis?
this is Commissioner Lloyd. Excuse me. So you brought up an annual event, the Adoration Parade. Are we going to charge them that high price? And are we going to charge them for the police and the fire?
So again, our approach has been and will continue to be that equal is equal, and we have to be consistent. So instead of picking exempt events or certain events over the other, it would be consistently applied with anybody that requests and receives a special event from the city, that it would be treated the same. Through our team, particularly some of the members from the chamber, they expressed concern to that very point with some of our longstanding events. Community partners have stepped up. There was concern back when the city really implemented the need to have liability insurance provided for special events since they're on city property. The Veterans Parade was not happy with that when it first came down, and the Chamber of Commerce at that time stepped up and was able to provide insurance to the requirement necessary for that event, and it's been able to continue as a result. So it may take some community support. It may take some sponsorship support to help these events cover some of these costs, because we understand, some are nonprofits and it is a little bit of money. But that is our suggestion to those longstanding events, that there are opportunities out there for them to cover those costs. But we believe it should be consistently applied across the board.
Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson Harris. So, Joel, with all due respect, I think you're just making a bunch of busy work for yourselves. I don't feel like that I appreciate the newcomers to town observing changes that need to be made and having a motivation to try to make things better. But I think that this is an effort to, put more control in the government's hands and reduce the freedom of individual property owners to have gatherings if they want to. And now we're required to have a 2-week or 30-day or longer process to go through and to pay a fee for it. And I just think that what we currently have in existence is adequate. I do agree that the change of shall to may should go back to shall, and that we should charge special events, those that really rise to the occasion of being a special event. But I just can't support the majority of your recommendation. And that's all I've got to say.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Any other comments by the commissioners? So it kind of looks like to me that we have kind of two different things here. One is going on with the idea of applying these regulations to activities on private property. And then the other one was to cover the costs using the word shall with the previous ones, which have always been on public property. So it's kind of a two different pronged approach here for these types of things. So that's my comment. Any other commissioners want to weigh in? No? Any other comments or questions for Joel? No? Then I would entertain a motion for resolution 20-12.2. Yes. Was someone, oh, I thought I heard some other thing. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Howden, so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Romine, second.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions at this particular time of Joel or the commissioners? No.
This is Commissioner Lloyd. I
Yes.
think there's a few of these old established veterans parades and adoration parade. I think we're gonna hit some flack on this one. By how
Referring,
much we're gonna be charging them for having these activities.
okay. I guess Joel, was there, while we're discussing here before the vote, was there any math put to this as to what some of the approximate costs would be? Do we know how many extra city people were required, say, for the Veterans Parade or those types of things?
So when we present special events to the Board of Aldermen for their consideration, we always collectively, as a staff, try our best to provide anticipated costs. And since it says may in the code today, we provide that information with the caveat that the Board of Aldermen always has the opportunity to recoup those costs. They haven't ever taken us up on that, but we always like to remind them. But to answer your question, the Veterans Day Parade and the Adoration Parade, averaging over the last 5 years or so, those can have expenses from the city anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000. I think the estimate we're preparing to show the board next Tuesday for the Adoration Parade is approximately $10,000 to assist with the Adoration Parade, with the vast majority of those costs being police overtime.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because I really had no idea, what kind of costs would be with the police overtime. I know when we attend, why we usually see, obviously, Public Works down there putting up barricades, the fire department's there, sometimes part of the parade, of course, and the police are there for security and for traffic control, et cetera. But as far as the amounts, why, knowing how much is I think, an important thing for us to know as we make the decisions. So one more thing. So the word may that's been in there. So you're saying that in the years this has been in place, that we have never activated even a portion of what the costs were?
That's correct. The one thing staff has done more recently, in about the last 5 years or so, as we've dealt with the half marathons and marathons throughout the community, is we've had those applicants reach out and provide their own barricades and pylons and safety measures, as opposed to the city being responsible to provide those. They're quite extensive. They require a lot, and so having the applicant, that's been a huge savings for the city, to not provide the staff to put and pick those up, or the actual items that may even get damaged during the event. So that's been a huge help.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
So I'm going to go back on this same little concern that I have. I'm right now, if we leave it the way it is, I'm going to have to vote no, because I think we are going to have a major public relations problem with those two type of entities if they're going to have to pay $10,000, and they haven't been paying that. And I'm afraid we're going to at least make a really bad image, or possibly make these go somewhere else. We don't want either one of those. So My concern's that.
I guess I'm kind of backpedaling a little bit here too, because of the exact numbers of the amount of money that's involved with each one of those. So I am kind of surprised maybe that the council or staff hasn't at some point figured out a way to obtain maybe a small amount of that back for whatever it needs, something that's more reasonable. But many of these organizations, you know, barely get by with that and provide a huge long-term service to us. So I think I would probably backpedal on my ideas about the shell also. Any other commissioners wish to comment?
Commissioner Pinkley,
Yes, Commissioner Pinkley.
Joel, if this were approved, would the alderman have the latitude to waive fees?
So I'm just trying to think this through. I mean, the fees are obviously set for the application themselves in the code, in Appendix A, and those are the fees we've proposed to you all tonight in the presentation. So I don't believe, and maybe Chris needs to assist me on this as I'm tripping through my words, but I don't think that opportunity ever comes about because the application has already been paid for, processed, and moved forward. It's well beyond that point by the time it gets to them.
It's real simple. A shall is a shall. There's no flexibility. We're taking the discretion out of code with that change.
Thank you, Attorney Lebec. Any other commissioner have a question or a comment? I guess my only other comment is as far as doing the level 1, 2, and 3, where it changes the amount of money to kind of process some of these things, is that amount of money doesn't bother me as much as I guess what the extraneous fees would be for that. So
It would definitely be some amount of assistance with helping the city cover its cost in processing these requests.
So for instance, if Commissioner so chose to amend it to remove the shall, revert back to the may, but leave the other parts there, that would be perhaps beneficial, a step forward maybe.
Again, you all have the opportunity to amend the request as you see fit.
Right. Any other comments or questions?
And we do have a motion and second, so it's on the floor to either vote or if anybody would make amendment.
Yeah. Can I hear any comments or amendments provided? No? Then we will vote for just this item then. Joel, if you would call roll please for that.
Howden,
No.
Lloyd,
No.
Pinkley,
No.
Romine,
Yes.
Davis,
No.
Harris.
No.
The request has been recommended for denial with a vote of 1 to 5.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. Joel, I think we have another item maybe?
Can I say something?
You want to wait till the end?
Before we
when
get-
we have
Okay,
these
I'll
questions?
shut up and wait, but I
Okay.
think we could have amended that maybe and made it happy for me. But
Yeah.
they can
well,
bring it back and we'll talk about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you, Joel. Will you help us with the next one?
Yes, so our last item this evening is a request for a municipal code amendment to Chapter 94 zoning, and this one's pertaining to microbreweries. Again, we'll be in Articles 1 and 4, talking about microbreweries. In the Article 1 change, just a little background, last year in November, the Board of Aldermen approved amendments to Chapter 6, which is pertaining to alcoholic beverages. And that change was presented and approved in response to the state's relaxations of regulations to more support microbreweries throughout the state. One of the things it included, though, was the definition itself of a microbrewery. And the state is specific to limit their production to 10,000 barrels per year. So that is one of the changes that was made back in November. However, in Chapter 94 today, our definition for a microbrewery sets the limit at 15,000 barrels. So because the city cannot have the ability for them to produce more barrels than what the state sets, we obviously need to update our definition first and foremost to fall in line with not only the state, but the other area within our own code. As we were processing this request to be completed, we were contacted by Alderman Whitus. He specifically was inquiring about the city's consideration of allowing microbreweries as a permitted use in our neighborhood commercial district. Currently, microbreweries are allowed only in community commercial and our business district. However, per code, their definitions, a microbrewery is less intense than another opportunity in code, which is just your brewery. As a result of it being a less intense use and the neighborhood commercial district being meant for less intense types of commercial uses, we believe that it is a good option for the community to consider. Many other communities within the area, within the region, within the state and beyond have all embraced microbreweries in the last several years as actually being complementary to neighborhoods and providing a gathering space, whether it's indoor or outdoor spaces, and would very much match the other uses that are currently permitted within our neighborhood commercial district. The other advantage is we have the ability to have supplementary use and structure standards. Those can obviously help us address potential concerns that people may have about a particular use and what effect they may have on adjacent properties. And we do also have our noise ordinance, our buffering requirements between neighborhood commercial and residential districts, as well as our sign codes, which are very limited for neighborhood commercial. So again, we can use those supplementary use standards to address other concerns. As a result, staff has come up with 3 supplementary use standards for you all to consider if you were to recommend approval of this being an allowed use in the neighborhood commercial district. The first one is that microbreweries shall only be open to the public between 2 and 10 p.m. Now, they would still be able to operate and do their production work. It's just that they would only be open to the public between 2 and 10. The second one is any outside seating area shall not exceed 50% of the setback standards for a zoning district which it is located. This simply gives them the ability, obviously, to have outdoor seating, but it's still, in addition to the buffering requirements, make sure those areas are set back from any adjoining properties so that we can start to, again, address any of the concerns people may have with noise or view or what have you. And the final is that all production, processing, and distribution activities shall be conducted within an enclosed building. As a result, staff recommends approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Any of the commissioners have a question or comment now for Joel?
Commissioner Davis, Joel, why aren't they open at lunchtime?
Again, these are our recommendations to start with. If you all feel that time can be expanded, that's completely up to you all for making that amendment. What we did was we researched other microbreweries in the area, and the 2 to 10 timeframe was pretty typical of all the ones that we looked to. So that was our starting point for discussion this evening.
Sounds fine to me. Thanks for the info. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
So the definition of microbrewery, I've been to microbreweries before that are really just a combination restaurant and brewery. And those hours, I don't think would meet everybody's requirement or needs. I think Commissioner Davis brought up a point, lunch, which should be included. And I would, Charlie's Steak and Ale used to be considered a microbrewery. It's no longer there, but it was just a restaurant. And I'm sure they want to be open later than 10 sometimes.
Yeah, we always would look at the use. If it happened to be a restaurant microbrewery combination, that would be something for us to review, and it may end up being that the restaurant is the primary use. And so then it would be allowed to have, the hours of operation for the restaurant, as opposed to the hours that have been presented to you all.
So Joel, just for clarity here, so the definitions for these microbreweries does not include having food available. It's strictly for the use of the brewed beer.
Correct. It's the production level of how much beer they produce in a year.
Okay.
That is what makes them a microbrewery.
Okay, so if, for instance, you did have one the ones that I've seen and been to, oftentimes at lunch, they act as a restaurant also. So for them to come to incorporate the food into their business, they would have to work out a different arrangement then, or would they be unable to sell the beer, say they were having beer with lunch?
Chris, do you have any thoughts on that? I know you've worked in Chapter 6 code more than I didn't know if there was certain definitions in that chapter when food was served, if that changes it to a different use.
There really isn't, Joel. I mean, I'm looking at the 2 to 10 p.m. as a pretty big, significant roadblock here on this. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple examples here in Springfield where we have a traditional microbrewery. Hell, there's one right down the street from me called Tie and Timber, and they're open from, I could look at the hours, but it's like 11 to midnight. So again, this may be something that where we would run into the situation if you had a restaurant on property or you had selling liquor by the drink, which would be the other complementary alcohol sale there, of having part of that facility being open for those opportunities and then subsequently being closed for the microbrewery portion. So again, this might be an opportunity for the Planning Commission to maybe consider an amendment.
Yeah, that's, and again, just a point of clarity that when we use these PowerPoint presentations, we're summarizing the information, and the actual code that we've suggested or recommended states that within the neighborhood commercial district, operating hours are restricted between 2 and 10. So if a microbrewery were to place themselves in the community commercial or entertainment district, as an example, they would not be subject to these hours. These hours are only for when it would be in the neighborhood commercial district. Again, our concern being the adjacency to residential areas versus entertainment areas or commercial areas.
And that ultimately fixes the problem from that standpoint.
Okay, so I guess we're talking specificity for being in neighborhood commercial for the 2 to 10 then, Joel, is that correct?
Just for that time frame, that's right. That's the way we've presented it to you all, again, as kind of a consideration for making this change and not allowing it just to operate without any, I guess, restriction within that district.
Okay. And do you happen to have the zoning map that shows where some of our neighborhood commercial areas are, or could you describe them to us?
I'd be nervous I'd crash Zoom, so I'll just describe them.
Okay.
We have a significant one here that is in between the downtown district. It runs parallel to Veterans Boulevard along the west side of Veterans Boulevard, the east side all being downtown. But if you can visualize all the commercial properties along Veterans on the west side, those are all currently zoned neighborhood commercial, so they buffer to the Lucia Ridge neighborhood. We also have a pocket that's along Fall Creek. It's only a handful of properties, and then we have another stretch of commercial properties on State Highway 165 that starts at the Welk Resort or the entrance to Point Royale and extends to the west or south all the way to the city limits. So those are kind of the three general areas. Actually, the fourth and I think the fourth and final one is Branson Landing Boulevard along the east side from Highway 65 south to the roundabout. So they're smaller properties in size, and again, just as I mentioned with the first grouping provides buffer from the downtown to the Lucia Ridge, the last one I mentioned provides buffer between Branson Landing Boulevard, the highway, and Lakewood Estates and Lakeview Terrace neighborhoods there to the east.
And those areas are considered low density residential. Some of those.
Correct.
Yeah, are
Correct.
the old R1s, right?
Correct.
Right. So this 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. would only apply to microbreweries that chose to open in those particular areas, not along the entertainment district or general commercial.
Correct.
Yeah, and on
and
that
it-
note-
microbreweries are also allowed in the downtown district as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Chairperson Harris, what I was
Yes.
going to point out is that there are 6 other areas where a microbrewery could exist in this city other than just neighborhood commercial. So they aren't just funneled into this one area.
Right. Okay. Right.
And I think, overall, the goal would be, for microbreweries to consider the entertainment district or the downtown probably before anywhere else. But if somebody found a property in one of the neighborhood commercial districts, again, it would at least put some restriction on them that they may think twice about if they want to be able to operate from those hours, or if they would rather be in a different district without any restriction on hours. We can use our zoning code, we can use our development codes to help guide development and certain uses, and this is just one example of how we're doing that.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Joel. Any other comments or questions of Joel?
Chairperson Harris,
Yes, Commissioner Howden.
now be the time to entertain any amendments that we have to propose.
We'd have to get a motion in a second, and then we could do that.
Okay.
Anyone else have a question of Joel? Or okay, then we will entertain a motion for Resolution 20-12-13, which is recommending approval of municipal code amendments to Chapter 94 pertaining to microbreweries. So we would need a motion to approve to start.
Howden, so moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Davis, second.
Okay. All right, then does anyone want to deal with some amendments related to times, et cetera?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner Howden.
I would like to amend Article 4 to say microbreweries shall only be open to the public between 12 p.m. and 10 p.m.
I'll second that. Davis.
Okay, Davis, second. Okay, any
Hey,
other?
Joel,
Yes.
or Chairperson Harris,
Yes.
one observation, the actual code change that's contemplated, it's on line 81. The code actually says within a neighborhood commercial district, operating hours are restricted to between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. daily. So if we wanted to make an amendment to change it to 12 p.m., we would just strike the 2 p.m. and make it 12 p.m. Because again, what we're looking at here on the screen is just a synopsis of the actual ordinance, actual code that's going to go forward.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So it is line 82 out of the proposed resolution in the staff report this evening.
Okay, so Joel, would you restate that for Commissioner Howden so he might agree to that?
Sure. So the amendment that was heard was to change the hours of the operating hours within the neighborhood commercial district as listed on line 82 of the resolution from 2 p.m. To 12 p.m.
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay. That's okay with you, Commissioner Howden?
Yes, sir.
Is the second okay with you, Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is everybody clear on the amendment? We'll vote on the amendment first, and then we'll finish voting on the original resolution.
Can I make a comment first?
Yeah, certainly, yes. Go ahead, Commissioner Moore.
Okay, if our purpose, Marshall, is to include lunch, lunch starts before 12 in a lot of places, like 11 or something. If it was the purpose for a lunch operation or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know, 2 sounds arbitrary. 12 sounds like it makes sense. That's my only, if if we want to, I don't know how we would do that. If it's more agreeable to the commission to make it 11, that actually makes sense as well. I'm open to that.
Okay, well, you'd have to restate that, and then you'd have to get a second, and perhaps from Alderman.
We have a motion and a second for the amendment, so we'd need to take a vote on that,
Yep.
and then
start.
we'd want to,
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's vote on the one that we had originally, and then if we so choose to change it up here related to the 11 a.m., we'll do that. So, Joel, would you call roll for the stated amendment?
Howden,
Yes.
Lloyd,
No.
Pinkley,
No.
Romine,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Harris.
No.
We have a 3-3 tie.
So it doesn't pass.
It does not pass.
Okay, so it's not passing, so that one's out, and we're still open for other amendments. Commissioner Howden?
Sure. I will make the amendment to try 11 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay. And is there a second for that one?
Commissioner Lloyd will second.
Okay.
And again, I'll simply just mention again that this is out of line 82 on the proposed resolution to strike 2 p.m. and change to 11 a.m.
Okay. Commissioners understand the amendment? Joe, would you call voting roll again for the amendment, please?
Howden,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Pinkley,
Yes.
Romine,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
That amendment passes 6-0.
Thank you, Joel. Any other amendments before we vote on the now modified resolution 20-12.3? Hearing none. Joe, would you call roll for the now modified resolution 20-12.3?
Howden,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Pinkley,
Commissioner
Pinkley?
Pinkley?
Yes.
Romine,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
With a 6-0 vote, it passes as amended.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, commissioners. Joel, we've made it through the public agenda items. Do you have anything you wish to say? And then I'll ask commissioners if they wish to make any comments.
No, I just appreciate everybody again taking part in our virtual meeting. And I know it is still kind of a little challenging to get used to, but appreciate everybody's patience and joining us. It's working out pretty well. Just a couple things to let you know on our radar we're working on is we're looking at a code change for nightly rentals. We've been working with a neighborhood that's had some concerns about some nightly rentals in their area. So that's something that we're working on with a couple of the aldermen, so stay tuned there. And then also, you may recall Commissioner Nichols was interested in staff looking at some potential language about allowing recreational vehicles on theater properties. So we'll be taking a look at that over the next month as well and hope to have some information for you to respond to at the next meeting we have. We will have at least one item in November. As I mentioned, we have another special use permit that is looking to get amended for hours of operation. It's the helicopter that's been operating next to the Ferris wheel. They're wanting to do Christmas light tours in the evening, and their current approved hours of operation would prevent them from doing that. So we will have at least that to present to you all for consideration in November.
Okay, thank you, Joel. At this time, any of the commissioners wish to make some comments, generally speaking? No? Okay.
I would.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
Excuse me. Okay, so the item that we did not approve tonight,
Yes.
this is my personal feeling on that. I would be good about all of the part of that item. It was just the part about the amount of the cost that shall be charged to a few of those events. You know, I think those levels and all that, I would be in favor of. So just a piece of that I was negative on.
Right.
That's my personal opinion.
Right. Well, I will, and I stated that during the meeting. That's the reason I backpedaled, was because of the what I consider large amounts of money there for many of those nonprofits. But, and as I stated before, I thought it was okay to have the categories to allow the city to make plans, important plans, to be able to handle those types of events. So Joel, will this go ahead and move forward then to council to look at, or?
Well, obviously, we take your all's recommendation seriously. I will have a conversation with Assistant City Administrator Manning about the results of the meeting tomorrow, and kind of lean on him for a recommendation. But yes, the item could move on to the Board of Aldermen. It just would simply have your all's recommendation for denial attached to it. And so again, we'll have that conversation and decide what next steps to take.
Right. Okay. And I know oftentimes one of the duties of the planning and zoning member, who is the alderman, is to help communicate that. And of course, Alderman C wasn't able to be here because of the other activities going on here tonight. But I know, Joel, you'll be able to present to council, if it gets to that, what our opinions were. And when you write up the minutes, you know, be sure and put some of the comments that we had made into that.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Harris?
Yes.
Very quickly, my concern only was that I think sometimes when we're looking at budgets and we have $1 million pools over here and we have tens of thousands of dollar pools over here, that if you're giving an option to kind of, you know, assess the tens of thousands of dollars as we're trying to be good stewards of our money, things like the Adoration Parade, the Veterans Parade are very important, you know, so that was why I still stuck with that without offering up an amendment.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have just general comments or questions before we hear a motion for adjournment? Nope. Okay, then Chair would entertain a motion for adjournment for this evening's meeting.
Davis, so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Hinckley.
Howden, second. Okay, so Davis and Howden. Thank you. Joel, would you call roll for adjournment?
Howden?
Here, yep, yes.
Lloyd?
Yes.
Pinkley?
Yes.
Romine?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
With a 6-0 vote, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. And thank you, commissioners. Be safe, be careful. And we'll
Bye,
see you
everybody.
see you in
Thank you.
November.
Good night.
Bye.